All right, problem 1-68. Find the domain and the range for each of the following functions. So looking at A, we'll start out here. Remember, domain, that is going to be all of the possible inputs. Those are x values. Range. This is going to be all of the possible outputs. That would be like our y values. So in case you forgot or you weren't in class there, that's something that we talked about. So when we look at A, we're going to be finding the domain and the range. So our domain, when we look at it here, we just have 3 points. We've got this point right here, which is the point -2, 0. We've got this point right here, which is the point -1, 1. And we've got this point here, which is 2, -1. As we look at all of our possible x values, we've got -2, a -1, and a 2. So our domain is going to end up being -2, -1, and 2, just like that. Our range for this problem, well, let's go upwards. Let's look at our y coordinates. We have a -1 on this point here. We've got this point here that has a y coordinate of 0, and we have this point here that has a y coordinate of 1. So we're going -1, 0, and 1. Those ones are a little bit easier when you have just the points. You just got to make sure you keep them straight, your x's and your y's. Let's look at B now. B, we've got not just points, we've got a segment. And that segment starts here on the x's, an open circle here, and it goes all the way over to here. So we have 2 endpoints. So we're looking at 2 inequalities there. So let's think about the first one. If we kind of were to cover up this end and look at this inequality going this way, we would say that x, this boundary is at -1. So we would say x is going to be greater than -1, and that's because of the open circle. It does not include that point. And x is going to be, if we look at this one here, we got a solid point at 1. So we're going to say x is less than or equal to +1. Now you can also write this as a compound inequality by basically flipping this one and then getting rid of the and. So we'd say, we could also write that as -1 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 1. Let's look at range now. I'm going to do the range in a different color. So range, we're looking up and down. So we're going to have a solid point here. Let's just pretend we're drawing a shadow onto the axis here. So it goes up. And then we actually end up with an open circle up here because we don't really have a point up here at 2. So as we look at range, we've got 2 endpoints again. So let's look at the bottom. We've got our lowest value at -1 here. So we could say that y is going to be greater than or equal to -1. And get to the top here, we're going to say that y is going to be less than 2. Because that's what our y coordinate would be up here. This one can also then be written as a compound inequality by taking it and just flipping this one around. We'd say -1 is going to be less than or equal to y. which is also less than or equal to 2. I'm sorry, less than 2, not less than or equal. There's A, there's B. Either one of these would be fine, either one of those would be fine. Let's look at C now. We'll do C in green here just so it kind of stands out. Let's do it over here. We can squeeze it in. So domain, we're looking left to right. So we're starting at -2, and we are going to project out to the right this way. And you notice we have an arrow, so it's going to go on and on forever. We have one endpoint here, so we're kind of thinking about it's going to be one inequality. So if we look here, this is -1. So our x values are going to be greater than -1. Our range, let's see, I might have to do that one in red. I'm out of color choices at the moment. We have an open circle on the bottom and an arrow on the top. So since it's like one inequality, or one endpoint, it'd be one inequality. So we're going to say range. The bottom of it is at -1. We're not including -1, and it goes up forever towards infinity. So y is greater than -1. And last but not least, let's look at D. I'm going to put it down here. We've got, as we look left to right, we have an arrow and an arrow, which means if we were to kind of trace the shadow onto the number line, it would go both ways, just like this. So we are talking about all real numbers. There are no breaks in it, so it's all real numbers. And this is the symbol for all real numbers. For range now, it's going up and down here. If we looked at it for a shadow, I'm sorry about the annoying ding. It happens whenever I change colors, and I don't know how to make it stop. There's arrows on both ends, so once again, just like the domain, it's going to be all real numbers as well. There is no restriction on what values we could plug into that function and what the outputs would be. It's going to span all the real numbers. Now, if you were writing these in interval notation, I guess I can provide you with those answers. I'll write those out here in black so you can see. This one, we're not really going to concerned about that, but our B, our domain, we'd be looking at -1, comma, 1, our highest and lowest values, remember. And then we are not including -1, but we are including the +1 as part of the domain. The range, we've got -1 to 2. So we are including -1, but we are not including 2 because it's an open circle. Letter C, x is greater than -1. So if you wanted to think about that, there we have a low end, but we don't have a high end. So this is like infinity out here, and this is like infinity up here. So we're going to say -1. We're going to put infinity in there. Now we're not including this point, so it's a parenthesis, and we never include infinity because remember, it's not a number, so you can't equal it. Same thing here with our range. It actually ends up being -1, infinity as well. And last but not least, we have down here, remember, this is how we write our all real numbers in interval notation. We're going to go -infinity to +infinity, both with parentheses. Hopefully you wrote them out in any of those equivalent ways there. This is problem 1-68. If you have more questions, please make sure you see your teacher or go visit Math Help. This is Mr. Boyd signing off. Thanks for listening.